Hey, what's going on? Jeff Lerner here, and in this video I am going to give you 3 hidden ways to save money. One of the biggest questions that I get and sort of general themes of people reaching out to me online, because I talk a lot about online business and starting up different ways to make money and get started in owning your own business. People are always asking me, like, how do I save up the money to start a business? So I thought I would shoot a video that was specifically focused on ways to save money so that you can start the business that you need to help you make money. Okay, cool. So this is all about 3 ways to save money. Now, again, on my channel, I have a zillion ways to make money. I talk all the time about business, starting your own business. I talk a lot about online business. I talk some about offline business. I talk about real estate investing. I talk about affiliate marketing. I talk about starting your online store. I talk about doing digital consulting. I talk about creating courses. Like, there's a million ways to start a business. But again, the number one thing that I get from people reaching out to me is saying, hey, I really want to start a business, but I get the sense that, like, to do so effectively, I'm going to need, working capital, or people don't always call it working capital. They may not even be familiar with that term. Sometimes they're just like, man, I'm broke and I want to do something about it, but I feel like I spend all my money on bills. Like Abraham Lincoln says, a penny saved is a penny earned. So we're going to talk about how to earn money, essentially doing things that we're already doing. I'm going to talk about some ways to kind of pull more cash out of your personal economy. We're going to get super basic here. We're going to talk about food. You're one of those people who eats, which means you're probably one of those people who spends some amount of money on food, which means there's opportunity to save some cheddar. Like, see what I did? Yeah, I shouldn't try. I should even joke. Just keep it straight, Jeff. Keep it straight. The number one way to save money related to the food part of your life is to just stop eating out. Eating in versus eating out. There's actually a study, and I can't remember who did the study, so it's gonna sound like I made it up, but it's actually a real study, I promise, that basically looked at the cost of eating out in major cities. Depending on what city people live in, different cities have different cultures, but sort of on the max side, you've got some cities in the South like Houston, Atlanta, Dallas, cities like that, where people eat out between 4 and 5 times a week. In some smaller cities, or not smaller cities, but just different cities around, they eat out more like 2 to 4 times a week, but that's eating out. And actually, at the time this study was done, it was before the prevalence of the internet and like Uber Eats and all the takeout apps. And so what they found now, and I saw this as like an addendum to the study, is that it does not account for the fact that people now are typically ordering, on average, almost a meal a day via takeout. And that's on top of eating out. So basically, when they kind of bundled all that data together, they said the average person per year would save between $1,200 and $1,500 if they would just stop eating out. $1,200 to $1,500, that's a lot of money for the average person. The average person, if you look at not necessarily what they make, the average income, for a family is maybe like 40 to 60 grand, kind of somewhere in that realm. But the average person, and we'll talk about this, the average person has less than $500 in savings. So if you were to cut $1,200 to $1,500 a year per person in cost, that's a huge deal in a world where the average person only has less than $500 in savings. Right there, just anything you can do to start winding down or reduce the amount of times that you eat out would be huge for your personal economy. For most people, the number one thing that drives eating out behavior is a lack of planning. Some of the people that I coach, I don't do as much coaching now, but I used to do a lot of coaching. And for a lot of people, they would try to have like a digital business, like an e-com store, or they would want to do affiliate marketing or something. And we would always start the coaching by kind of setting out an ad budget. Say, what are you going to spend to actually drive leads to your business? And so for most people, it was like $100 a month, $200 a month. And I'd say, okay, man, if we could get that up to like $500 a month, we would exponentially change the returns and the growth of your business. And so we were trying to shave tens and hundreds of dollars here and there. And this eating out thing typically came down to better planning. So it was like shopping in bulk. And what I really would recommend to people is that you kind of come up with a few core staple meals. And like, here's the deal. This stuff is like humbling, right? It's like the whole eating ramen, fueled by ramen, right? That's like a record label now for musicians, because I used to be a musician, and I did eat my share of ramen. But like, it's humbling as grown-ass adults. We don't want to like be having to skimp on food and be like, oh, I can't eat out, but I'm gonna eat chicken soup 5 nights this week or whatever, or I'm gonna make chili, and we'll actually talk about this. Slow cooker is like one of the greatest hacks for saving money. People are like, I don't want to do that, but it's at the end of the day, it's you gotta make a choice. Most people don't have enough discretionary income to say, well, I can eat out as much as I want, and I can afford to not plan ahead. I can afford to not be a prepared, organized person, and I still have the money to fuel my investments and drive traffic to my business, or like whatever money would mean for you. Most people just don't have that luxury, and so you've got to be disciplined and make the sacrifices. So that said, let's talk about the slow cooker. All right, the slow cooker. When I was in my 20s. Somebody told me, man, you gotta get yourself a crock pot. And I crock potted the crap out of some food. And here's the thing about the crock pot. First of all, and actually I gotta mention this, in the same study about eating out versus eating in, they found that 77% of all the sodium that's taken in the American diet comes from either eating out or from fast food. So think about that right there. You wanna lower your blood pressure, you wanna live longer, stop eating out, because you can't control, and most people don't realize how much salt goes into restaurant food. So 77% of your sodium will be cut out if you just start eating and cooking at home. But okay, so back to the slow cooker. So here's the greatest thing about the slow cooker is that you can get away with buying cheap, tough meat. Like I'm telling you, when I was in my 20s, I would go to like the butcher at the store and I would be like, give me the meat that's like the edge piece that you didn't bother to put in the package because you didn't think anybody, like you didn't feel right selling it. Give me that piece of meat. And they would sell me meat for pennies on the dollar. And I would go home and I would slow cook those bad boys all day long. You can cook anything into tenderness with a slow cooker. You could cook a shoe and make it edible with a slow cooker. So seriously though, you save money buying less expensive cuts of meat and slow cook them, and then they're still edible. And here's the other thing about when you slow cook. Pan cooking cooks the moisture out of food, which dehydrates the food, which makes it less filling. When you slow cook food, you actually keep a lot of the moisture in the food. It's more filling and more hydrating when you eat it. It doesn't actually dehydrate. You don't have to pull water out of your body in order to rehydrate the food that you cook the water out of in the pan. And the slow cooker also saves you money. You might not even think about this, but it saves you money because it first of all, it produces less heat than an oven, so you don't have to run your AC as much to offset the heat like you do if you cook in an oven. And it also uses less power than like an oven, or even costs less than a gas stove. So you're saving power, and you're saving air conditioning from having to offset the heat produced. The slow cooker, like I said, it's like the greatest hack next to ramen noodle soup there is for saving money on food. The next thing I want to talk about is banking. So I was doing a little bit of research on this banking thing. Honestly, it's kind of depressing. First of all, banking, the amount of money that banks generate from fees has almost tripled in the last 30 years. 1984, it was like, I want to say it was like $115 a year per person. That was adjusted for inflation. That was in today's dollars. So back then it was even less, but $115 per person. Now it's $329 per year per person that banks generate. And remember what I said earlier, the average American has less than $500 in savings. So you're spending $330 per year on bank fees, and you have less than $500 in savings. That means bank fees every 2 years, or less than 2 years, every 18 months are basically draining your life savings. That's insanity. And this is like a total hidden thing that people don't realize. They actually did in the survey I was reading, which was at Bank Fee Finder. You can actually Google Bank Fee Finder. It's software. You can scan your bank account and it'll tell you what you're paying in overdraft fees. It'll tell you what you're paying in ATM fees. It'll tell you what you're paying in service fees, which are like this nebulous thing that banks apply after the fact. They run some analysis and they just debit you service fees. Bank Fee Finder is the software that'll analyze that for you. And they put out all this data. So it was staggering. So $329 per year. That's $27 per month. Now, when they surveyed a bunch of people, the average person said, I think I'm spending about $5 a month on bank fees. So in people's minds, they think they're spending $5 a month, but really they're spending $27 a month. Okay, let me put that in perspective for you. Netflix plus Spotify plus Amazon Prime all together, less than $27 a month. So the average American is spending more on bank fees, charges for putting your money in a bank, which is what they tell you to do with your money, essentially charges for accessing your own money, is costing you more than Netflix, Spotify, and Amazon Prime subscriptions. Like, I thought that was shocking and disturbing and disgusting and depressing. And then this was to really put the cherry on top. The average American household spends $103 a year on any sort of books, including textbooks. $103 a year. We're spending 3 times as much money, more than 3 times as much money, to just piss money away to banks, who, by the way, just the major US banks charged $33 billion in fees last year to people who have on average less than $500 in savings. 3 times as much as we're spending on books and, to become educated and learn about these things and just become a more sophisticated populace, right? It's kind of disturbing. And the worst bank, Bank of America. I bank at Chase. I have accounts at Chase and Wells Fargo because I travel a lot and I do business in different towns. And some towns it's easier to get to Wells Fargo. Some towns it's easier to get to a Chase. I do real estate investing, so sometimes I'm in a town and I have to go get cash to pay contractors or something. And so I primarily bank at Chase and Wells Fargo, and that gives me pretty much nationwide coverage. And they're both bad. Don't get me wrong, Chase and Wells Fargo are not the friend to the people, but they aren't nearly as bad as Bank of America. Bank of America is almost twice as bad as Wells Fargo and Chase in terms of the average fees that they charge their customers, their savers, I don't know what you call them, the people that bank with them. Chase was a little bit better than Wells Fargo. Anyways, what to do about this now that I've gone on and on about the problem. So first of all, go talk to your banker. Sit down with your banker. Remember when you signed up for your account, they gave you that chart and we're like, which account do you want? And you kind of glazed over and you're like, I don't know, whatever, just give me the one that gives me, checks or whatever. The student, most people sign up when they're students. That's kind of when they get their first checking account. So we sign up for the student checking or whatever, which is actually interesting. And not to veer off track again, but it's actually older people that pay the most in bank fees because younger people so often sign up for these student things and they hook you in other ways. When you're younger, but a lot of the student accounts waive fees and stuff. Sit down and talk to your banker and be like, listen, man, I want less fees or else I'm going to switch banks. They want your business more than they want your fees. They want your fees, but they want even more than they want your fees, they want your business. So if you basically tell them, I'm going to switch banks if you don't either refund some fees and set me up with an account that minimizes fees, they'll do it. Also, ATMs. I was shocked when I went through the report at that Bank Fee Finder. The report that they published and how much money people are spending on just to get access to their money. You think about ATMs. First of all, use your bank's ATM. A lot of banks will charge you an additional fee if you use another bank's ATM. And also, just plan ahead. Take out more money. Don't be out and be like, oh man, I'll meet you for coffee, but I gotta hit the ATM first and go grab $20. You spend $2. It's 10%, right? If you spend $2 to get $20, it's 10%. And it's all about planning. It's just like food. It's all about planning. And then the next thing is a lot of accounts have minimums, and a lot of people, basic financial planning, we're taught to have different accounts. But as much as possible, it's better to combine accounts and maintain a minimum balance that gets your fees waived than to segment your accounts. And again, financial planning courses will teach you have an account to save for taxes, have an account to save for your necessities, have an account to save for your discretionary expenses. That's all great. But if you're below the minimums and you're getting feed to death, then consolidate your accounts. And then another one, a big one, that same survey, they surveyed people and I forget, it was 65%. I think it was about 2/3 of people do not ever remember the moment when they opted into overdraft protection. But yeah, technically banks have to get you to opt into overdraft protection. They can't just slap it on. So they have all these really subtle ways of getting you to say yes to if you overdraft, don't you want us to cover the charge for you? You don't want that embarrassing situation where you're standing in line and every people say, okay, yeah, and it's we don't realize what's happening. But at the end of the day, it's $35. They approve a $2 candy bar and they debit $35 for the privilege. And so in the survey, most people are like, yeah, I'd rather them just decline the charge, but I don't ever remember opting in to overdraft protection. So when you sit down with your banker, tell them, remove overdraft protection unless you haven't had an overdraft fee in a year, which would actually make you in a sadly small statistical portion of at least Americans. That's where this data came from. opt out of overdraft protection. And then another thing you can do to actually reduce fees with your bank, a lot of banks will put you on a reduced fee schedule, or they'll waive certain fees if you start having your paycheck direct deposited into the account. Because again, they want your deposits, because your deposits create base capital that they can use to fund loans. And so the predictability of having your paycheck come into the bank, they'll offset that. They'll kind of trade you with reduced fees. So consider that, at least talk to your bank if that's an option. And then finally, I recommend that you, again, I use multiple banks so that whatever, I use between Chase and Wells Fargo, and I have a local bank where I live. And then I also have a virtual bank that I use that's online. So like if I'm overseas or anywhere where there's not one of my primary US banks, I can get money out of an ATM. And if you use virtual banks, they'll actually, a lot of virtual banks, because they don't have physical locations and they know that they can't compete with the ATMs, they'll just refund any ATM fees that you get from third-party ATMs. I haven't done the research for this video to recommend one, but just if you look up virtual banks, there's online banks that basically give you essentially free worldwide ATMs. Okay, so that's banking. We've talked about food, we've talked about banking. Now let's talk about the third thing where there's some hidden money that I think a lot of people can access, which is your car. First of all, a lot of people, we talked about banking, right? Banks love car loans because they essentially get you to just pay money for something that is, you typically owe as much or more than what it's worth. And banks love that because think about it. Let's say you buy a $30,000 car. A year later, it's only worth 18 grand, but you still have 27 grand on the loan. So there's an $18,000 asset, you still have to pay off $27,000 plus interest or whatever, right? So banks love car loans. Banks make a ton of money on car loans. And most people, it's like one of the last bills they'll default on because the bank will literally come take your car. Car financing is generally a horrible idea. You typically want to put as much cash down as you can for a car. And I'm generally not a big fan of tying up cash. I love using other people's money. I love leverage. I love taking on good debt, but a car is not good debt. You want to finance as little as possible on a car because again, you're typically paying interest on an asset that doesn't actually exist because very often your car loan is greater than the value of the underlying car. Always buy used cars, never buy a new car, just like as a hard and fast rule, unless you're just rolling in dough, don't buy a new car. Horrible idea. Negotiate with car dealers. My buddy who owns a car dealership probably doesn't really want me to say how willing they usually are to negotiate if you push them. They're very good salespeople, so they're very good at acting like there's not room to negotiate, but there's room to negotiate. Especially if you go towards the end of the month when they're trying to make their numbers, and end of the month or end of the year they're trying to clear off the lot or make certain numbers. You can usually negotiate. And then one thing a lot of people don't really think about, but maintaining correct tire pressure can actually impact what you spend on gas by as much as 5%. Let's say you're spending like $800 a year on gas. It can actually save you another, what would that be, like $40 just to maintain good tire pressure, which is also, by the way, safe, gives you better traction in weather, and is just a good practice. Anyways, also keeps your tires from wearing out too fast and having to spend money to replace tires. Maintaining good tire pressure, proper tire pressure, can actually save you money on gas. And then bundling insurance. Well, two things with insurance. Car insurance is the last thing I want to talk about. One is bundle it. If you have a homeowner's policy, if you have health insurance, obviously you have auto policy, if you have liability policy, if you have life insurance. Usually if you call up your insurance agent, say, hey, I want to bundle those with the same carrier, there's discounts for bundling your policies. And then also, I read some data online, and in case anybody's like, why does he make videos where he just talks about stuff that he read online? First of all, that's what most people on YouTube that educate do. They teach stuff that they've learned it somewhere, right? But also, like, the point here is that I'm doing research here for you to kind of save you some time. So instead of having to go do all this research, you just watch my videos, which, by the way, is a good opportunity for me to say, if you want to have an awesome life, you want to save money, and you want to make money, and you want to learn how to do cool stuff and pay for cool stuff and have a great life, like I said, subscribe to my channel. That's what my channel is all about. It's about having an awesome life and being creative and finding innovative ways to pay for that awesome life, because that's usually, for most people, what the stumbling block is. Or like, I want to do all these awesome things, but my life is challenging because I got to go spend all my time at my job or figure out how to make ends meet, or I'm constantly running short of money, and so I can't be the person, I can't do the things, I can't have the things, I can't love on people, I can't give abundantly and generously because I feel stuck, and it's like a money thing. So hence my channel. Go ahead and subscribe. Make sure you click the little, what is it, a little bell that notifies you when I put out new videos if you're into this kind of stuff. So to finish my point, this study that I read online was basically saying most people have a ridiculously low deductible. If you actually do an analysis, and you know, here's the thing, when consumers lose, businesses win, right? So they did an analysis and they said, okay, let's look at the money that people are paying for their insurance based on what their deductible is compared to the money that they would spend based on the probability of them having an accident and the additional money that they would have to spend towards their deductible if they raise their deductible. And they figured out Americans are spending 4 times as much money unnecessarily on insurance as they would be, or as they would be on auto repairs if they would just raise their deductible on their insurance policy. And if you're not familiar with how that works, basically you take a lower deductible, which means the insurance company will cover more of an accident, but in exchange you pay higher amounts for your insurance. And again, when they mapped all it out, they looked at what percentage of people are actually going to have an accident, what amount are they going to have to spend, and what are they paying for their insurance. People are spending 4 times more on the more expensive insurance as they would just to cover the extra deductible in the event that they did have an accident. So raise your deductible. I recommend at least $1,000 deductible. If you carry the savings, because obviously you don't want to get like in a pinch and not have a car because you can't afford to get it repaired. But if you carry a sufficient savings balance, I even recommend a $2,500 deductible, but at the very least do $1,000. $500 deductibles, you're getting murdered on your insurance rates. I don't care who your carrier is. Anyway, that's my video on how to save money in some hidden places: your food, your bank fees, and your car. 3 things that most of us are already paying for. And in most of our cases, we're paying more than we have to. And so if you're looking to start a business, you're looking to have more money, saving money is a great place to start. All right. Thanks for your time. I'll catch you in the next video.